Welcome to the live stream, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host today, Bumpy McSquigums, joined by Cupogoodness and a tiny disaster. And we're here. Hello, we're working with a small marketing budget today. That is our goal, our hope, our dream, as it were. And we're going to give you all the ins, the outs, and all the things that we can think of as to your kind of best practices or just what you can do with a small budget that maybe you didn't think to do. Services that are offered by not only us, but a variety of folks across the board, or things you can do yourself. So who would like to kick it off today? And good evening / afternoon / morning to everyone, including Missy. Hi.
Hey, Missy. And yeah, good afternoon, morning, evening to you all as well. This is a very interesting topic. It's a near and dear to our heart topic because it's a heart topic. Because we deal with this like all the time. In the indies and the clients that we work with at Indie Bros, this is something that we are wrestling with, that we are kind of just figuring out with developers on a daily basis. I'd say like a lot of the time, which is to say that a lot of indies have limited resources and limited budgets for additional support outside of what they can do. So this was sort of an interesting topic. In fact, it is not just sort of, it is an interesting topic that I believe Tiny Disaster brought to the table. I can't remember who exactly did, but I think it was TD. And it makes a lot of sense to go over because I don't think that there's one right answer in terms of what you should do with your limited amount of cash. And yeah, it's just something that I think we all will have kind of our own perspective on, and it would be interesting to hear from the audience too what they might do if they had certain inclinations in mind. And we're not here to shoot anything down, but we'll make sure that any gotchas or any other best practices and things of that sort are pointed out as we go through this process today as well. So it's a really interesting topic. It made me kind of think immediately, like, and kind of churn in my head, what would I do? What would I, if I had, say, well, let's define it, right? Let's define what small marketing budget means. Are we talking about $3,000 USD? Are we talking about less or more, like 5,000 or 1,000? What do we mean when we say small budget, TD?
That, I think it's an impossible question to answer because it's going to be different to everybody.
We want to set a marker, though, I think, or at least we want to define things in terms of how much they're going to cost you as we talk about.
Yeah.
Because what we're going to say here, a lot of what we talk about is it worth it at the monetary level you're spending? Like,
maybe instead we look at it of like, okay, if it's going to be about this percentage, because like if we say, okay, this is the marker, then it becomes less helpful information for anyone who isn't at that marker. So it's kind of, it is worth this much to you. Or
okay.
like,
I kind of see what you're saying. But in my, like, I still think that there's ways to like point out, like, advertising with a small amount of money is probably not where you're wanting to invest your budget. Almost factually, there may be some small exceptions where there's some small ad spends that you can do on various platforms that might be worth a little bit. But most likely, if you don't have tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to put towards like a major advertising campaign, I personally, like, right there's like, this is just like a perspective thing, like right off the bat, but I personally wouldn't invest any of my small budget towards advertising unless it was like desperate times and I really couldn't figure out anything else to do with that said budget. And I have a list of things that I would do, I think, ahead of that.
I maybe have a different perspective on advertising, but I want to hear kind of what you see as the musts or the like most important things to prioritize. Because for me, looking at using social media tools for advertising instead of like magazine campaigns or something, it's the most
Correct.
flexible in terms of like how much you can throw at it. Like there's not a lot you can buy in terms of services for $200, but Facebook could probably use you $200 to get you in front of potential players.
Yeah, it just depends on what it means, right? What it translates to. And a lot of times we've seen advertising stuff just not translate well in terms of clicking through, and then doing something after that click through, like a follow, a wish list, or a purchase, that kind of thing. Now, I don't think that I think it's one of those things that is probably ever changing based on, like, what platforms out there, what advertising options are out there. And yet it's one of those static beliefs that advertising with a low budget is probably not worth it. So it's one of those things where perceptively I'm saying it's not worth it, and that's probably true a lot of the times, but there's still going to be tons of opportunities at small spends that are out there, but you're going to have to research them and figure them out. You may have to experiment with them ahead of time. Do you have the budget to do that? To at least it makes sense to experiment with them ahead of time to try to confirm, before you really, break the bank of what your budget is on putting money into that in like a really hardcore way. You'd like to get some sort of confirmation, if you could, through your own experimentation, on top of, other stories, other testimonials, essentially, that you could find out there.
Yeah.
Even better if you could get it from somebody who you're kind of like close with, or colleagues with, or peers with, etc.
Yeah, that was my biggest caveat with advertising. If you're going to do, say, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever on your own, is it costs money to get them to be decently effective. It does
Right.
take time and experimentation to get there. And like, if you have the opportunity to have someone who's done all of those things before do it, you're going to get more bang for your buck. But it's a balance, and it's something you can teach yourself, but it costs money to get there and to try it. So.
Bumpy, we've been chatting a bunch. I think you had something earlier. What did you want to say?
Oh, just one thing I wanted to make abundantly clear for any developer that is going to be reaching out to content creators and things of that nature. They should know by now, because there's horror stories all over the internet, but a lot of scammers out there. Whether you're just reaching out or people are reaching out to you, a lot of people are going to be like, "Oh, hey, I'm so and so," and then they'll give you a fake email and all that. So always go and make sure you confirm the person's identity, whether it's, checking their about section on YouTube or on their Twitter. Usually they'll have their, official business email somewhere, and make sure you follow through with that, because you don't want to get scammed. And I hear that the Curator Connect, it's something that Tiny Disaster wanted to talk about maybe later on down the line. I heard that that's almost 100% scammers. Just nonstop. Well, the people that reach out.
The ones that reach out.
Yeah.
But there is a way to go about the Curator Connect in a way that will kind of insulate you, I think, from that. And we can't talk, like you said, we'll talk about that when we get into the Steam.
So just stuff. In general, just be careful, if it's like, oh, hey, here's, it's Markiplier. Oh, they want to cover my thing. They want 65 codes to give away to the community. Yeah. And then they go and they sell them on third-party sites that I don't know how they're even up and running, but they do. And
there's actually,
you just lose a lot of money that way. So be careful.
If you make that step up, and all of a sudden that it's ironically it's a step in the right direction, because if scammers are interested in your game, it's showing that there's interest in your game. To begin with, because scammers are not going to try to scam games that they don't see value in, or have their own personal interest in, if that makes sense. So ironically, if you're getting scam emails, don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It's just something that you have to deal with as you're getting, more exposed and more popular. And we can go. I'm not going to tangent on this too long because we don't have that much time. But there are real telltale signs. If you're a veteran in the industry and just have games that you field emails for, media email requests for, there are real clear telltale signs when a scam is going on. Usually less information, usually vague, asking for 3 to 4 codes or a few codes as opposed to a single code, which is usually the case for most games. Or if they ask for more than one code, and Bumpy's very good at this, he explains why he would like to have more than one code, very clearly and concisely. So that's really important, just to kind of keep your eye on that kind of stuff. The Curator Connect is a really important point, that we're getting a lot of scam emails from people that say they represent this curator page or that. It's really easy to create a curator page and not be legitimate. And so I'll talk about when we get into the Steam page optimization stuff. We'll talk about how to go about finding the most relevant Steam curators, and how some folks like Missy might have an uphill battle, because Missy's someone who might need to reach out more versus just being found within the Steam system and stuff. So we'll talk about that as well. Like Missy, your plight is not misunderstood at all. Like we know you're going through some stuff because of basically bad apples in the pie, and that's true across basically all of what we do.
Yep.
Like marketing, content creation, all that kind of stuff. There's bad apples that make our job that much harder because they question the legitimacy of the entire situation as opposed to just the bad apples. So it's frustrating. Anyway, let's move forward. Let's talk about some of the things that we would do with the small budget. Do you want me to take my notes and start throwing them out there? TD, do you have some things in mind that you'd like to put out there first?
I definitely like to hear your notes. You are the veteran in this particular area, so.
Okay. Well, so I wrote just these random. This is kind of scatterbrained, but this is what I have down from the other day that I wrote down. Putting your small budget towards doing a better job yourself. So this would be like consultation, getting feedback from a marketing expert or company like Indie Brothers, experts like at Indie Brothers that informs you on what you can and should get done on your own. So this is for rookie or first time developers who maybe have kind of hit a brick wall and can't break through in terms of exposure with their games. And they feel like, I'm going to drop my ego here. I'm going to take some consultation. I'm going to put some money into professional consultation and get a report from, like a company like Indie Brothers to see what it is that I am doing and I'm not doing, or I'm doing wrong, or etc. Or what, based on what their report is. And we do this for a lot of developers. I believe both of you have been involved in feedback reports, consultations before for Indie Bros and various titles that we've done. It comes up pretty frequently, actually. And it's just one of those things that it's a nice thing to do if you feel like you're not personally where you would want to be to run your own campaign or to kind of do it yourself, because you will get a bunch of feedback that says, okay, they're saying that I can do A, B, C, and D with basically I think I personally could do this by myself, and then they said that I just need to make sure to get this done. E, F, G might be like I'm gonna have to spend money that I don't have, so I'm either gonna cross that off the list or just sort of table that for now and find a time to do it. And you prioritize and kind of go from there. If you have a small marketing budget, you will be making cuts to your list of things that you would like to do for your game release, most likely, because you don't have enough budget to cover all of your bases. So that said, we're trying to make the most out of what you have and, put your eggs in the right basket, so to speak, with how limited you have. So if you say any thoughts on that before I move on? I'm gonna move on to after this to say, if you do have your marketing chops and all that kind of stuff down as an individual developer, what maybe you might spend on. But any thoughts on the idea that of, if you don't know what you're doing, consultation feedback is where you probably want to spend first and foremost.
Biggest question, if I were a new indie dev watching this, of like, how do I know if I know? Like,
that's so
everyone
tough, right?
Everyone can think that they have a decent idea of how games are marketed, but
this takes deep self-reflection. It takes ego dropping, like, entirely. You have to leave your ego at the door and not just say, I know how to do this, and actually question whether or not you do. And you need to really have a serious conversation with yourself and others that are close to you that are willing to talk to you about your work in the space. Those kind of conversations can mean a lot, even if it's just someone who is tangentially related to the game industry. So, like, I think that's where you find out first. Make sure that your confidence in your and your belief in yourself is well supported, has a great bedrock, is not cocky, comes from a place of experience, most of the time experience, you would imagine. Or, if you're a savant and you know it, there's people out there that are just great at what they do and they nail it the first time and they just keep going from there. They don't need any help. They don't need any marketing support. They don't even need an article. They sell great games great on Steam. It happens not all the time, but it happens. It's part of the normal thing that happens, in the ecosystem. So, if you know you're great and you're getting the feedback that you are, then that's great. That's fine and stuff like that. If you think you're great and you're not getting good feedback, you're not accumulating the numbers, like the pre-release numbers we always talk about, right? Follows, wish list stuff, store page related stuff, social media stuff, not generating a lot of buzz on that, then that's where you have to kind of check yourself and say, wait a second. I thought I knew how to do this. I thought I was reading all the important articles out there that told me how to do these things the right way. And you can do all of that, but it might not be enough. It might not center you the right way. You might not retain the right information, or you might have long-standing beliefs that are wrong now. For like they might be good long-standing beliefs at some points in time or certain like situations, but maybe they're not serving you well in the moment for your particular situation, for your game, etc. So those are really things that, again, come from self-reflection, right? Come from being really honest with yourself and saying, if this is my first time and I don't have a lot of experience, and you want it to go somewhere, you really need to be thinking about how my lack of experience could hurt here. And I need to make sure that I'm trying to cover that potential issue, the lack of experience, as best I can. And how do I do that? Well, I talk to other people who have been through it and that are professionals that understand what is going to happen, or what could happen anyway, versus what I just think might happen because I haven't been through it before.
Yep. I'm very much a person who tries to do as much as I can by myself with everything that I do, from artwork, which I've very slowly, very slightly improved on over the years of doing thumbnails and so on and so forth, to just everything that I've done. But when I started off, I asked people because I didn't know what the heck I was doing, because I wanted to make sure that starting off, I put my best foot forward and I at least had some clue what I was going to do. And I don't generally ask for help outside of things. I like to figure it out on my own. So yeah, anytime you're doing something that's big, that's important, it's a good idea to at least talk with someone who's either been through it before, or this is something that they do professionally for a living type situation. So yeah, if it's your first game and you want it to be as big of a success as it can be, maybe it's a good idea to at least be in a room with someone, or on Skype or whatever, Zoom, whatever program you want to use, and at least talk to them, hear what they have to say, and they'll give you thoughts on how to market the game. It's only gonna be helpful. There's no downside to it.
Yeah, try to approach it with a take it or leave it kind of take it or leave it kind of situation. Know that you're going to stand by some of your kind of fundamental beliefs in what you're doing. And you don't, if you're someone who's like worried that you're going to listen to somebody and just do what they say, or verbatim and stuff, make sure that you have the confidence to stand up for the things that you think are the best ways to go about your creation, your game, your channel, etc. But it's just great to have that to process and kind of digest and integrate as it makes sense for you. You know what I mean? Like, you should ultimately be doing the things that make sense for you and your product or your service or your creation or whatever.
Yep.
Okay. So here's some things I would do. I would maybe spend on if we have. And before we do that, let's talk about maybe some of the other things that I think qualify for you're experienced enough to take on this stuff by yourself. So if you are sort of into the Steam store page optimizations we always talk about on the show, then that's really important, right? Because you have an understanding that the numero uno kind of like most important aspect of whether your game's going to sell or not, or build up the right kind of exposure pre-release, is going to be that store page on Steam. If you're doing a PC release, which we'll presume you are in most cases. So just for our sake. So for the sake of discussion. So we like with the PC Steam store page, obviously the descriptions, the trailer, the screenshots, the additional kind of calls to action we pointed out that you can do, like using banners, the announcement sections, And then, of course, all the different things you can do in the lead up to your release, like Steam Next Fest. If let's just say you have like the Curator Connect, which is what I mentioned we were going to talk about that before. Let's talk about that now. So in Steam, we've talked about this on a prior episode that I believe is on YouTube. You can go into your Steamworks backend as a developer, and you can access Curator Connect and actually send out 100 total codes to curators that you can look up and browse through their search. Now, the search is a little finicky and it takes a little bit of time, but basically, if you open a spreadsheet or something like that and try to compile, like, let's say, your top 200, and the reason why you do 200 is because you can recall codes from curators that don't accept the code for whatever reason. It could be because they're idle, it could be because they just passed on it, etc. But you can recall that code after maybe, say, a month of time. Maybe if it doesn't, if they don't pick it up before launch, you pull it back and then you resend it out to someone who maybe wasn't in that top 100, but it is in the top 150, top 200, that kind of thing.
Before we dive into this too much, this is kind of a point off of the last one. I just wanted to get this out real quick. Missy was asking, she thinks it might be scary to ask for help from somebody who does it full time while not having a budget to offer. So I know that, like, before I ever even got into this, my limited knowledge from being a content creator, I was always offering any suggestion that I could think of as to help people whenever they were like, yeah, I'm just not sure how to get the game out there and so on and so forth. I know I recommended you guys to a fair few people back in the day because you guys always seem to do a phenomenal job, and then all these other various things. So, like, I never wanted anything from that. And oftentimes when you do have some professionals in the business, they are willing to, have a conversation and not be like, oh, you owe me $5,000 or some ridiculous amount of money, right? So there will be times where if it's something small and easy, you can get free consultation. Other times when it's a little bit more in depth, say, hey, I have got like $500. Could you give me a hand? How would you say they should approach that, I guess?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, right? And so I think if you have a connection to that person, like an acquaintance or a friend, it's maybe a little more reasonable to reach out and just say, hey, I have a question. You're obviously not trying to hit them up for just a mountain worth of data or information from them, but if you have like a specific question, that kind of thing, then it's often fine to just kind of reach out, see if you'll get a response. You should do it if you feel like you're, close enough to that person that they would, you've developed some sort of relationship with them that they don't mind kind of replying back, that kind of thing. Otherwise, it's really nice and I think proper to offer some sort of financial compensation for their consultation. Now,
just let them know up front, I would assume. Like how much you have to work with.
Right. So let them know, first of all, that you're willing to pay them, and secondly, that you're working with the budget of X. You know what I mean? Like, or that you'd be willing to pay them up to this amount, depending on what they're able to consult. Maybe you're not going to commit to 500 if they do, answer one question, but if they do more of a full kind of thing. So you can define those parameters. It's actually good to do that early on because you get past that sort of like, hot potato of you tell me, you tell me emails that you can get caught in sometimes. So, define the terms quickly if you can and let them know that, and let them know a lot of times it's fine to say this. You don't have to say this, but if you know that that's a low amount for what they would be usually offered, you can always tell them, I'm on a limited budget. I understand that this is probably not your normal rate. This is just what I have to offer. It's good to point that out.
Any help you can give would be appreciated type situation.
Yeah, it's just nice. It's just for our end, for the person like the consultor, I don't know, like to hear that points to us that we're not trying to short you for selfish reasons.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like we only have this much to offer. We understand that, we kind of have an understanding that if you were flush with, your offers at the budget that you're at the rate that you would like, you probably wouldn't have the availability for us. But maybe you don't right now, and maybe you have willingness to help us out at this budget, stuff like that. You're not trying to lowball them, in a way that is skeezy or scummy or anything like that. It's just like, I honestly only have this much to give on this, and if you don't, and maybe you could point me in the right direction if you don't personally want to do that kind of stuff. It can have that kind of conversation. It's a back and forth. but you're not going to offend anybody by, approaching it with that kind of mindset. I think people appreciate that anyway, regardless of whether if it hits their rate or not. Just having to hear that from them that they were going to be offered a payment, and then it's up to them at that point, right? So it's just in their ballpark. It's in their court if they're going to accept your proposal, and then you kind of figure out the details from there before you sign anything, and then you sign a contract, a really nice, easy contract, hopefully that defines everything clearly, and then they go about their business. You pay them, and there you go. That should be that.
Sorry, just to remind you where you left off, you just had said about the 200 people to put in a list for the Curator Connect. And
yeah, we're ready to bounce back to that.
Yeah, just to remind you where you were.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, like you're basically looking to go through and build out a list. Best practices would say look for people that support indie games in the first place, curators that support indie games in the first place, that are consistently still active, that are probably not joke reviews, which there's a lot of those out there, that just do like one-word reviews or just silly gag
blood pressure goes
kind
up.
of humor. And so those ones, like there may be a couple of famous ones that you want to throw in just to see if they'll do it, but I wouldn't invest like a ton of effort into that kind of thing. I think looking at the popular ones and seeing which ones are like actually viable for you is a good place to start, and then head down to sort of the mid to smaller range channels that still have built up some sort of or curators that have built up some sort of following, like thousands if possible, on their curator page. And then you can kind of understand that you're going to have some better results from the ones that just like sending out to YouTubers. You're probably going to get more YouTubers to respond at the 30,000 or maybe 10 to 50,000 subscriber level than you would at the 150,000 to 1 million subscriber level. It's a different. Just people just don't aren't as responsive at the higher levels, and a lot of them are specialists, right? They only play certain games, or they've reached their popularity off of one game, or that kind of thing. So you're not getting necessarily a lot of value from those either. We've talked about the value of the mid-tier content creators as well, because they're responsive, they're specialists as well, but they often will be a little bit more variety based or play more games or in a genre as opposed to the Fortnite or Madden guy, etc. So
going back to the Curator Connect, would it be a viable thing to look at other games that are similar to yours? Because usually there is something out there that's similar to yours, and seeing maybe who did a curation on that.
Yeah, absolutely great best practice there is to find more curators that you think, oh, these folks are going to give us a chance. See if you can find a game that you compare to favorably. You know what I mean? Like in various ways and such. Not just that you're like, we want to be like them. You know what I mean? If they're like a super popular game, right, and you're not that, you're not necessarily going to have that same success rate that they had with those curators. But if you're like, oh, it's an indie that we feel like we would be competing with, on a storefront, etc., and it's it's comparable in various ways. It doesn't even have to be the same genre, right? Necessarily. It just has to be that kind of the right fit, and you're seeing a bunch of curators that are like, oh, this curator covered this game. That indicates that they would, potentially consider mine as well.
And Missy pointed out loyalty. If you reviewed a game of theirs in the past as a curator, more likely to, have a code sent to you ahead of time. Same is true for content creators.
So what happens there is if we have a curator, just like a content creator, that posts a positive review and communicates through us via email, then we will integrate that curator into our press PR system. So they will be added with alongside the media members, the content creators, etc. And so that's a nice way to make sure that curators are getting the code one way or the other. And it's a special bonus because you save extra codes essentially on Curator Connect proper by sending loyal curators that cover you Steam codes from your own batch essentially via email. So that's like a slight little hack there that you get away with that you get extra codes out of essentially on the Curator Connect Steamworks side. So yeah, that's that's all to say that the Steam presence, presuming you have all of that stuff going on, like you feel really confident in building out the Steam presence, you feel confident in a lot of different areas in terms of your knowledge, like, but you remain just one or one person and a bunch of other people that are specialists at their jobs that are probably not going to be able to just flip the switch and do a bunch of like marketing work and stuff. Like if I think about Vertigo Gaming Inc, like 80% of our hires are extremely specialist. We would never be able to ask them to do anything else than what they were doing. You know what I mean? It would just make no sense. So that's just to say, if you're just one person, or if only one person can carry the day in terms of, all the things that you have to do to get a game off the ground for like a full launch, and just, taking in everything, social media, PR, all the stuff that we've already talked about, the Steam store page optimization, then the first thing I think about is like possibly a single hire to assist you during launch month. I like from my perspective, I personally hire somebody that can help me with I hire someone like TD who can help me with social media. Someone like either Bumpy or TD that can help me with like community management, just interactions that if you're going big and it's going well, then that means it's going to create more work for you, right? More interactions that you have to take on. So to have somebody that's like willing to buffer that for you, do a lot of the responses themselves, and then bring you the the VIP type comments and things that it's like let's actually have the developer in on this. That would be a nice thing, I think, if I felt like I have 50,000 wish lists. I'm great. It's going to go really well. I have this totally planned out right. But there's still a bunch of work ahead of me. That small marketing budget would be putting towards someone to assist me, essentially. That's from my perspective, by the way. It's not necessarily something that I just think, oh, yes, everybody just needs to hire an assistant and they'll be totally fine. I would know what I would want out of that person to get the most out of it, to make sure that I'm not just exhausted, as maybe there are really important opportunities that pop up 2, 3, 5, 7, 14 days after you launch your game. It's so easy to just fall into that trap of going all in, that week before launch, or maybe, like if you're doing it right, 6 weeks before launch, etc. Like, and by the time you cross the finish line, you're exhausted. I mean, just exhausted. So it's just something that you think about. I think about a lot. It isn't. You don't need anybody that's like a huge specialist, an entry-level person that follows directions. And of course, it helps to have some knowledge of the systems that they'll be interacting with, such as like relevant social media sites. If they have no clue what TikTok is, that's not great, or like they have no clue what Twitter is, that's not helpful. But like an entry level person that just has like a basic understanding of how to like work on the web, it's really all you need. And so you're not like necessarily looking for like the someone who's like been like a personal assistant for like celebrities in LA for like 20 years. You don't need someone like that. You know what I mean? Like you just need somebody that you feel like can listen and follow instructions and do the job that you're asking, do the jobs and tasks that you're asking them to. So that to me, like, as a tired person in my mid to late 30s, that's something that I would look to right away, like immediately. As someone in their 20s who's probably like, I have the energy of like 5 people, I could do this by myself. That's your mileage may vary on that, but I always think like, even looking back to those days, I'm like, my brain would have been less frantic, like less spinning around in circles all the time if I had someone assisting me and I had someone to delegate some of my work to in those early days, instead of just saying, oh, I'm trying to get everything done and some of this stuff is good enough and not great. I could spend more time maybe making those areas great if I wasn't just having to like constantly spin every single plate. So that's something I think about. Before I move on to that point, next point, anything on that you think of, TD or Bumpy?
Nothing from me.
Not on that specifically, but I think something you touched on earlier kind of calls back to what we were talking about before we actually started the chat, about how not one size fits all this conversation is.
Right.
And knowing you and like I said, your energy levels, and knowing what your skill sets are. And actually, where my brain had jumped to initially when you said hiring someone like me or Bumpy, or hiring someone who maybe isn't that specialist, someone with a little bit more of I can cover a few different bases.
Yeah, it's
Not for the extreme experts I'm going to get
Yeah.
paid top tier salary level, but I can do a little bit of everything. Someone like
Right.
that could be very helpful.
Right, jack of all trades, and the reason why I say entry level is that entry level is generally a natural jack of all trades because they're looking to learn on the job, right, and go to different areas and that kind of thing. So, but if you can find a professional jack of all trades that's willing to work for your budget, then that can be a really transformative situation for your marketing plan because you have someone that is experienced and will work for the amount you have. So it just depends on what you have. Like the budgets we have are like variable. 500, is different than 3,000 is different than 5,000, of course. And how much work has to be done, what are the dates, what is schedule in terms of what you're talking about, all that comes into play. And we don't have enough time to talk about all that in deep minutia. But yeah. So if the previous 2 points are covered, what we talked about with everything, and you have the manpower. So that was why I talked about that. Was the first thing was you needed to have the knowledge. If you have the knowledge, then okay, do you have the manpower? Now that you have both of those boxes checked, which are crucial, like the most important 2 things to me. If you have both those boxes checked, now we can get into sort of maybe, I wouldn't call this luxury time, but we're getting closer into the luxury items as opposed to the things you have to have, right? The manpower and the knowledge you have to have. There's to make the most out of what you're doing. So if the previous 2 points are covered or not an issue, everything is optimized that can be controlled at the dev's end. Then putting all the small budget towards extremely targeted exposure opportunities would be maybe where I would look next. So finding the right individuals and audiences. If I have, again, I call his name, I sing his praises a lot. If I have a turn-based strategy game, I'm probably going to want to look up someone like Bumpy McSquigums because that audience that's his audience. Not everybody on his audience, but that's his core.
Yeah, that's the heart and soul of my channel.
That's something that you personally have represented, and stood for a really long time as well. So it makes sense to me. A lot of times it's like, does it make sense for the audience is actually the most important question before does it make sense for the content creator, right? So does it make sense for their audience? Yes. Okay, that's the most important thing. It most likely will make sense for the content creator based off of the fact that the audience is a yes. But it can go the other way. Hey, the content creator covers a lot of variety, but the audience doesn't dig the game. You know what I mean? That can happen. So that's why I think of it backwards, right? Where you're just like, does their audience kind of thing? So someone like Bumpy, I'd be like, they have a tactical turn-based audience. So for I know this is not to say anything about your subscribers, Bumpy, but if you were saying the upper echelon of millions, it'd be I'm not going to have the budget most likely for you at that point. Those people are asking for prohibitive budgets or prohibitive you can't spend it's like I can't make that commitment as an indie developer to spend that amount of money. It's way too big of a risk because someone that has just what would be considered a mid-tier amount of subscribers, the tens of thousands or low hundreds of thousands, actually might be healthier, might actually make more out of the partnership that I have with them with my game than that person with millions of subscribers for things that we've already talked about and other reasons as well. We've seen that this is true. So anyway, what I would do is find I don't just if I had a budget, I would hope that it would be enough that I could do this maybe with a handful of channels, like Bumpy's included, essentially. Be able to sponsor. And there was a debate about if sponsored content is something that catches audiences' eyes. I think that it's more digestible now than it used to be. This is a little anecdotal, but I've had some conversations about this. Back in the 2015 era when sponsored content was happening,
5-10 years ago. Yeah.
It was much more the audience was
you sold out. How dare you take money?
Or there seems to be a much clearer understanding from the general person that sponsorships need to occur for their favorite content creators to continue to exist.
Exactly, and they understand that.
Yeah. So that understanding leads to the fact, and I think on the flip side, that content creators are much better at picking what sponsored kind of content they do now than they did maybe 5-10 years ago, or rather. As a whole, they do better. They do better now than they used to because if you have sponsored content that doesn't fit right, that's going to be a disaster kind of across the board, right? Everybody loses, including the content creator who loses face, possibly loses subscribers from it, that kind of thing. So they're not looking to take on subscription or sponsorship deals, right? That don't make sense for them at this point. Where back in the day, it was just a gold rush. Oh, money! Someone wants me to give me money, that kind of thing and stuff.
Well, even back in those days too, there was so many fewer choices as to who's going to sponsor because the developers already see, the kind of negative impact it used to have, the negative connotation. So it was, hey, you've got these like 5 people that sponsor everyone. They're on every channel.
And it's normal for like Burger King to like sponsor people now. You know what I mean? Like it's like normal. It's like normalized for like big normal. Everybody knows these corporations to actually get involved now and offer streamers and content creators money where they never did that before. Like if they did, it was a super duper small percentage of companies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Compared to now, where it's like, oh, you don't have a content creator or streamer plan, like as a big business, like what's wrong with you? Like why aren't you putting some of your ad spending money towards this kind of thing? So. Times have changed, and I think that means that sponsored content is more digestible now. And as long as you're, again, extremely targeted, sponsored content makes the most sense. So that's where I would spend. Like, I think that's like the first thing that comes to mind. Like I said, if you have your basics, your most important fundamentals checked, then you would go out and try to get a few of those developers to cover. And this can be with somebody. Say like Bumpy and I like are really close. Even in theory, like we are in real life, but theoretically, say if like we have a good relationship, he's covered like all of our games. He's gonna cover this game without payment. You can still sponsor him and like make a bigger thing out of it. Like and maybe ask a little bit more out of Bumpy than just like here's the code and do your thing. Like when you do a sponsorship, the content creator a lot of times, as long as they're reasonable, is going to be willing to do a few more things that within reason, of course, for on their side to support the game and the developer that's paying them. So that's something to think about as well. How do I get the most out of this spends? Not just the concentrated audience, but can Bumpy put in a call to action on his description on his social media? Can he mention, you guys should go to buy the game right now on the store page, at least like maybe 2 or 3 times during his content creation or his hour-long or 2-hour streamer, et cetera, whatever you guys end up doing. You don't want to get, again, too into the minutia where the content creator gets turned off and is like, okay, you're asking me to do too many things. This is too much, and I don't want to do it for the amount you're offering. But make sure that you're getting the value out of it as much as possible by making sure that they're willing to commit to the things that you ask that you would like done. Like we've always talked about the importance of the call to actions in particular.
Yeah, be clear with what you want to have done, and if it's feasible, be willing to work and do a little back and forth. If there's something that like, well, maybe if we did this, would be a good idea. Like, oh, that's great. So, people that, especially if you find someone who's really into whatever it is that you're doing. Like, I was fortunate enough to be sponsored for Phoenix Point, and that was a game that I covered extensively over the course. And then they reached out to me, and they're like, hey, you want to do a sponsored video? And I was like, yeah. I spent so many hours doing it. It probably wasn't worth the actual money, but it was still a really cool experience. And I loved doing it. It was great.
Sponsoring is more than just that code exchange and the support of the coverage. It's doing something special together, and it doesn't have to be anything like like overblown or way out of proportion. But it's a little more special, and both sides should be able to get the value out of that situation. So that's like the thing that I would do if I had that kind of luxury spending on the budget where I felt like everything else was covered that we talked about that was important. Some things that maybe I wouldn't do. I wouldn't do any public expos or shows unless they cost nothing to do, as in they were local. The exhibiting fees were next to nothing, and I didn't have to pay for hotel. I didn't have to pay for plane, all that kind of stuff. Like, I guess, but most of the time we don't live in. I mean, there's a few people that live in there's a lot of people that actually live in Metropolis that might be able to take advantage of that. But that's not me personally. I don't have any big shows that are right next to me. I could drive to a couple of them, but I would still have to find a place to stay, etc. Right? Like I wouldn't just be able to drive back to my abode at the end of the day. So that caveat aside, I wouldn't do any shows. One good show would blow the budget. like immediately. If we're talking about like 3,000 to 5,000, then it would blow the budget. If we're talking about 500, then you shouldn't even, it's not even like a thought. But so one good show would blow the budget, and you don't even know if you got the right value out of it, because it's actually very hard to extract value out of those public shows. I think we have talked about this, not maybe at length, but this could be another maybe topic we talk about, how to get the most out of like major shows like Penny Arcade Expo and such, because you're getting 80,000 people to walk through the expo, but you're really talking about like a few hundred people that are actually going to be sitting down playing your game, and there's only maybe half or less of those thousands and thousands of people that are even going to wander by your alleyway, your booth, and see anything. So there's a lot to think about there in terms of how to maximize value. Oh, it's this busy show and everybody's there and stuff like that. Yeah, well, it's really busy, and people are not there to see you most of the time either. So there's a lot going on there that you have to consider, and maybe a topic we can cover on another day. But
yeah, we
not
touched that way back in the day. I just randomly started asking you about it, and you answered your experiences. So definitely something we can come back to, because I don't think that's
like
on the YouTube
topic
channel.
Yeah, more like a full topic at some point.
Yep.
So I would also this is what I wrote down originally, but this is kind of sounding like I'm disparaging our company, Indie Brothers, and I'm not. I just wouldn't try to hire anyone on the cheap, if that makes sense. I would make sure that obviously you want to make your dollar stretch as far as you can, get the most value out of it, but don't cheap anybody, because you're going to form a bad relationship there on like multiple different facets. And one of them is that you're not going to get their optimal efforts, which is like really important. Like, you really want them to be all in with this, right? Like, you don't want them to be like, well, I'll just half-ass it, or I'll just do, well, even doing the bare minimum is fine. That's what you're asking them to do. But my point is that like they won't feel like doing anything other than the bare minimum, and they might not even feel like doing that if you're not paying them properly. So I would not try to cheaply hire a marketing company like Indie Brothers as like for like full service. If you only have, say, $3,000, usually full service for us would be like in the mid 4-figure range starting, and that's on a pretty tight schedule. If it's like we're talking about more than 2 weeks to 4 weeks, like we're going into like multiple months, then we're talking about closer to like low 5 figures and rising. So that kind of budget is not what if your small budget in your head is not in the upper 4 figures, low 5 figures, then you shouldn't be looking to hire a full service marketing agency, because they're not going to be able to cover all the bases that you want them to cover with the amount of money that you have. So instead, go ahead.
So you're probably going to get into this too, but that's full service marketing company. I think the wording for it should be, don't hire a marketing company to do the full service, because multiple times, or we have multiple things that we do. We break it out into multiple ways, and you can often pick and choose what you want. And I think this is what you're going to get into here. So
yeah, certainly don't look for a monolithic marketing company that says you have to pay us $5,000 a month,
and we're doing this one thing, right, and it's our only service.
Or we're doing all of these things, but you don't get to pick and choose, right? It's not a la carte. So, and Indie Brothers is a la carte, which is really important, right? Like, because I feel like, we're piecemeal with our services. If you just need one service or this or that, we're willing to entertain and even, obviously go forward with a contract on that, versus other companies that would, like marketing companies that are some of our competition, would not entertain that. They're monolithic in terms of how they contract with developers. It's one way, their way, or the highway, essentially, which good for them if they're in that position to do that, right, I guess. But it also is limiting. And I also feel like you're missing out on certain opportunities with really, really good products and developers when you do that as well. So having some malleability is important. You obviously don't want to be too desperate, as coming from my side. Coming from our side, right, on the Indie Brothers company side, we don't want to be too desperate with things, but being malleable is really important for us to get clients in the first place. Any developers are timid to approach companies like us in the first place, thinking that they're going to get swatted down by saying you don't have it nearly enough and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
so
or even beyond that, they feel. I think a lot of people just have this idea that they're going to be taken advantage of. It's like, oh, well, I only want this one thing. Oh, well, you're going to get this full service, like the companies that you were talking about.
Or taking advantage of like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do the cookie cutter stuff for you, like we do everybody else. It's not going to be effective, but you still have to pay us.
Yeah.
So that is also obviously a massive turnoff for indie developers, and something that is a perception that works against working with companies like ours. So that's getting back to like the bad apples and bad actors kind of conversation. So anyway, if you have the value for a company like ours is usually found around like so the value for a company like ours, like Indie Brothers, is usually found like the optimal value for Indie Brothers. Usually found around that mid-tier status quo marketing spending thousands for a multifaceted campaign, but not tens or hundreds of thousands for ad campaigns, etc. But ultimately, I think a small budget should be spent empowering yourself to do a better job than you previously could. If you're already sharp to everything, you need to be using most, if not all, of your small budget for intelligent, targeted spends. Makes the most sense. That's where I'm coming from in terms of, basically a veteran of 100 campaigns, with a shield and the bald head and all that kind of stuff. I've been through it all, and I think that's how I think about it. Now, that's not trying to toot my horn. That is my perspective, is what I'm saying. And so my perspective is going to be my own, and it's not necessarily is going to be right for every situation or every game or every kind of thing and stuff. But rather, just here's kind of where I think I would go initially. Also, not knowing any particular details, right? We haven't talked about, like, we might even do this again at some point with specific examples, right? Like specific games. We could do this as an exercise and say, well, what would you spend on this particular IP or game versus this one? Because that would be an interesting exercise to see down the line as well, because it would be different answers. Like, we would say, oh, they need to focus on this or they need to focus on that. Maybe not even like the small budget, but just in general, we could do that at some point. But that's kind of what we do anyway for the store page optimizations. I don't know.
I say I wouldn't be opposed to, and we won't have time today, but even going into more the specifics of what we do offer, like go down the list of things that we say, hey, here's the stuff that we do, and just let people know what it is that we offer in a per chunk thing, not necessarily again price wise, but the actual things that we do.
A breakdown of our services as a full episode is actually not a bad idea, because we have a lot of them, and there's lots of different areas that we can touch on.
That's stuff that they might not even have thought that existed or they could do or needed to be done.
Well, right, and some things are like active more times than others, like mock reviews, of course, is something that we do intermittently. It's not something that we're like doing mock reviews every single month or whatever, but that's something that comes along that can really benefit developers in certain situations.
Yep. Was there any final notes here? I've actually gone off the notes. Nope. Targeted spending. So yeah, any thoughts?
I was going to ask if there were any like specific examples you could think of from past campaigns you've worked on or things you've seen in the industry of like targeted, however you phrase it, of like the one thing you should be spending on. The
targeted marketing.
Yeah, but you phrase it a certain way when you were saying it. Yeah.
A lot of times the hard part of it is that you don't get that full explanation of the breakdown of data in Steam, right? So it's like I can't necessarily tell if it's not a really clear spike, like in what it was. So it's like before the event happened, whatever event we're talking about, whatever promotion or sponsorship or whatever, before that happened, if there's not a clear spike when it happens, or it's spiking for other reasons, then that data gets muddled, right?
Yeah.
But even looking away from like knowing how effective it is, just examples of the kinds of opportunities you're talking about.
Well, like for Cook Serve Delicious 3, we had voice actors that were streamers as well. Right there, we sponsored those two people right away because we knew that they had good audiences, that they were going to be excited to talk about the game because they worked on the game. And that their audience was going to be excited because they worked on the game as well, right? Their audience loves them. They're in the game. They love the game. It's like it's almost like a math equation. It's going to get there for a lot of these people. So we got a lot of support just from that itself. We also extended it out to like people that had supported Cook Serve Delicious in like a really big way in the past for like Cook Serve Delicious 1 and 2. If we had like big content creators that had covered those games, then we tried to sponsor them as well, and basically just try to create our own hype train. Basically control our own hype essentially, which is really hard to do a lot of the times, right? We felt this is our ability with our budget we have. This is our ability to control our portion of the narrative a little bit and create our own exposure. And we sponsored people that we always thought they're going to be super excited about playing the game. Like they're not going to be faking it. They're actually going to have genuine enjoyment playing it, and their audience is hopefully going to see that and radiate off of them, and that's going to bring positivity. Now, we had a higher budget for that, but if it was like say lower, like we were like in the range that we're talking about, then we probably would have done that in a more limited, kind of capacity. Trying to think about
Well, even for Cook
other
Serve,
things.
I have an idea for Cook Serve Delicious 3 or any of the future games at some point. You could do maybe a yearly Iron Cook competition where you bring some of your best people in. It's just a random thought I was thinking while you were talking, and you have them compete at various different levels. Give them all like an unlocked save file, so everything's upgraded or whatever, and then have them compete and see who does it in the best time or with the fewest mistakes or something like that, and just kind of have
Yeah,
like
and it,
streamers competing against each other.
that's one of those things where you have to convince the production team to get on board with you as the marketing guy and stuff. But like, it's really cool if you can get your production team to commit to like those kind of things where you're making it extra special. Usually, we'll call in or get those commitments from those people you would like to have involved in the situation, like the content creators and stuff. That gives them that much more incentive, right, Bumpy, to like want to get involved. And it's like it's not just like a random sponsor thing. It's like this is fun. This is gonna be
Yeah.
fun. There's a lot to this and stuff, so I definitely agree with that.
And ideas like that
um
can be, say your game has competitive nature. You can have little like online tournaments. Maybe have a
yeah,
small gift card, like $100 gift card as the prize or something like that. You can have streamers sign up, and
yeah,
you can just do little events like that, and then maybe even sponsor some streamers to build the hype for that leading into it or something. So different targeted things like that. Maybe some sort of event. Again,
here's
we'll
another thing. Yeah, here's another thing I would do is I would, if you're successful on a platform that like on the free version of that platform, say that you've gotten some big upvote like posts on Reddit, like some of the subreddits that are relevant to your game. Then at that point, I would like look to maybe doing some small ad spends on a space that I've already found success in, and so that people, I think advertising before you have success in that space is less valuable, if that makes sense, because people are going to just kind of skip over ads most of the time. But if they've interacted with your product in some way or your game in some way before, um, via just like various posts in our games, our gaming, other massive, way over bloated, but still massive exposure subreddits like that, then maybe doing some ad spends on those particular subreddits make a lot of sense as like the second or third time that the game is being sort of surfaced for a lot of the audience members. So it's like it doesn't make sense to spend small advertisement money just willy-nilly. But it does make sense if you are having success on a platform already, using the free tools that you have. Like say on TikTok, you're just having success just doing your account management. I don't even think TikTok has. I don't. They probably have payment type advertisements and stuff.
Yeah.
I just haven't looked. Okay, but it's like those kind of things make more sense if you're already seeing success on the platform. If that makes sense. Like I
yeah.
wouldn't spend a lot of time if you're not having success on the platform because you're just flushing your money probably away. So yeah, I think that's kind of what I had in mind. I feel like I completely railroaded the entire conversation for the entire hour. But
You are definitely the one who knows the most about this. Do not stress.
well, okay, but I mean, like, is there anything else that we think about that in terms of like other small budget? I'm trying to think if there's any other areas that I haven't thought of that makes sense, because I know there are. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's other areas that I think maybe putting 1,000 towards that would be worthwhile. I just haven't. I didn't think of it during the note session, and I haven't thought of it now.
Well,
So,
even
but
even
something.
a social media campaign like with someone like Tiny Disaster heading that up, not necessarily advertising, but paying someone to go and come up with creative things to get people interested and have a buzz on that. That could be something you could be a targeting expenditure.
Right, and sponsorship opportunities don't have to be limited to streams and videos. Even if you have streamers and content creators that you're involving with their sponsorship, a lot of that might be coming from the social media side, or maybe someone major can't cover you on their stream, but they're willing to give you a tweet, like something like that. Like maybe that's worthwhile to invest your sponsorship into. you could even go more outside the box than that. As Bumpy mentioned, there's certain, like the competition idea. There's other things that you can do that, as long as it's not just like wonky or creates a lot of friction to interact with, that make something up that's special for your game specifically if you can, as opposed to just the standard stuff. The standard stuff is fine, but if you can come up with like additional avenues of this makes sense for this game to cover.
Getting creative in general,
Yeah.
like, rather than staying away from the things that are already established at a certain price point. And as Missy said,
I was gonna say,
making a bundle on Steam with another developer with a similar themed game, or just collabing with other developers generally.
So
Get creative.
That's the other thing that
doesn't
we haven't
require a
mentioned
budget,
is
though.
that,
I don't think.
yeah, but that's a good point. Is that one of the things that we didn't mention before that you can be doing with little to no budget is cross promotion with other developers that are willing to cross promote with you, and that's right. So like the Cook Serverlicious 3 is in the cooking bundle or whatever. I can't remember what it's exactly called, but it's with Overcooked 2 and Cooking Simulator, and that creates that sort of pretzel-like formation of extra exposure for the three games that are involved there, right?
Cross-contaminating your audiences, which is always a win.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, definitely, you're looking to do everything you can where you can just, the investment is your time when you have a low budget, right?
Yeah.
Like if your investment is just your time, then and it's gonna basically clearly be a benefit from you, then those are the things that need to be handled. And then of course you need to solve the manpower. Do you have enough people involved to get what you need to get done without everybody, and specifically you, the most important person, if you're the solo dev or whatever, or the creator, like to make sure that you're functional and available to and through your launch. And after that, it's just looking for the most intelligent way to spend your money, targeted spends, where to get audiences that fit, that will want to learn more about your game, that will want to click through, that will give you the highest percentage possible of people that will translate from seeing the content right on Bumpy's YouTube channel and actually going further than that. Not just seeing it, actually going further than that. It's always a small amount of people, actually, or percentage in the end it's smaller than you would hope that translates and stuff. But it will be better. That small percentage will be healthier if the audience is more attuned to what you're doing, right? Like more attuned to your product.
Yep. Missy is saying that P Cube Limited, or whatever their full company's called, had their Sunset Something early access release do an amazing social media marketing campaign where they photoshopped their characters in screenshots of other games that released in the week, which was Die After Sunset was the game.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, marketing through social media is never a bad idea. Reaching out to specific right fit content creators can be a game changer. And then obviously all the other various things when releasing the game, all the Steam store page optimization, all the stuff that we kind of went over, all important things to do. Any final global wrap up thoughts before we break it off for this week?
Definitely have the ability, if you it comes from a place of privilege, so I don't want to just say have money, but if you can scrape together some sort of small marketing
You
budget,
can have money.
yeah, it's like if you can't have money, right? Yeah. But other than that, like if you're able to put a small marketing budget together, you're probably giving yourself a pretty good advantage versus somebody who wasn't willing or able to do that ahead of time, right? This, I don't want to come from a place that say like you have to have money to do this, but if it makes sense to be able to put off your game a little put off your game's release for a little bit of time, so that you can get some money together to do a proper marketing campaign for it, even at the levels that we're talking about, it's probably worth doing. In most cases nowadays, we're seeing that you really don't want to flub up these pre-release and launch opportunities. Otherwise, the already uphill battle becomes sort of a inverted climb.
And I think we'll be talking about a lot of this next week as well, where we're talking about early access best practices. So we're getting into some of the opportunities that come with that. Missy had pointed out to me, and we kind of lost it in the curator talk, but having your contact information be easy to find if you're doing the Curator Connect system, if just in general, so that you're easy to get in touch with for people who are interested in your game and want to work with you. Sometimes people will come to you, but you have to make it as easy as possible. Having your contact information, having a Twitter account.
I hate having to jump through hoops too to find contact information. So yes, it's a big important thing.
Yeah, unless you're in that success tier where you're like, I don't need anyone, then you should probably have some way to get contacted in some way.
We'll dig into that as well next week, because talking about bugs and all of that as you go through early access.
Yep. So early access best practices is next week for us. And the week after, we will not be here. I will be horribly busy on my birthday. I'll be sad, but I'll also be happy because to check out some cool stuff. So it's going to be fine. It's going to be good. So yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Take care. See you then. Bye.